The Wheel of Time, episode 7. This was one that was either going to really make or break the season for me. I have been wiffle-waffling hard with certain elements to this show I've really enjoyed, and others that have been needing work. I've already accepted this is like another turning of the wheel. It's not exactly the books, and changes need to be made to condense it to 8 episodes. We know for sure that Rafe wanted more, and the studio told him no. How that makes sense, I have no idea. They put so much money into this show, but we have 8, and 7 did a lot of the legwork that was needed for this season to actually be positive for me. That being said, I yet again still had criticisms. Before we get into my review / summary of this episode, I'm just going to say thank you to Lord of Maps for sponsoring this video. More on them before the rating. Alright, I just want to go ahead and put it forth. Best cold open yet, and I've said that a few times. Basically every cold open to this show I have liked more than the actual cold open to the first episode we have gotten, but I still think the one we should have had before episode 1 is Logain's entrance. But here we have a Maiden of the Spear, a member of the Aiel, massacring people left and right while giving birth. And I've been wondering, how are they going to make the Aiel leave an impression on the viewer? Mission fucking accomplished! The first encounter we've had with a living Aiel is this brutality, where we see someone who, yes, is in the throes of labor, just kill 4 or 5 people in fairly well choreographed action. At least it was shot really well, so kudos! I enjoyed it quite a bit, and we have an ending that leaves us on a bit of a cliffhanger as a knight shows up holding a blade to her throat. I'm going to see some people, I'm sure, upset that this Aiel was killing with their veil down and all of that, but for me, if you're in labor, it's pretty understandable. You're not going to take the time to do that no matter how hard your cultural devotion is. And on top of that, these changes that allow people to act more, I'm not really gonna have a problem with. Call me a heathen to the Wheel of Time, but I don't want an actor's face obscured, especially in a scene like this, but hey, that's my subjective take. I will say, I was watching this episode with Kayla, and she was losing her shit at the visuals of a woman giving birth, massacring knights in slow-mo. And I have to admit, I was like, yeah, I've never seen that before. Well done. That was cool. Ginger ninjas are here. And my last comments here are going to be, again, this show is surprisingly brutal, which I feel is the correct choice to make. That's subjective, but Jordan's writing was not to get into the gore, but often imply it. And the show either could PG-13ify itself and stay more true to the tone of the writing, or be bloody and actually show what the book just kind of hinted at. Like, if you've read The Wheel of Time as many times as I had, you really pick up on the fact that there's a lot more gore than you kind of get on your first read through, because Jordan as an author kind of diverts it quite away from the grim, dark, hyper-focused lens on violence we get now. But this show, it's maintained a balance of tone here that feels true enough to his tone while also not neutering itself. Very difficult balance to find. I'm sure I'll have a more detailed video on in the future, but this leads up to the moment where this Maiden of the Spear is knifed in the back, and that got an audible from me and Kayla, because, you know, you're not only watching this woman be stabbed, even though I've read the books and I know that baby is fine, you're still watching what looks like a baby be stabbed in the womb, which is horrifying. And then we see, as it is revealed later in the episode, Tam show up to help her deliver the baby, because Tam's a good guy. Then we get our opening credit sequence, and then our continuation of the rather, I found it awkward, end to episode 6, where we have our characters going, Matt, oh no, guys, Matt, he's not, Matt, the door's closed, but I'm gonna say Matt like Matt. And that is the last we've seen of Barney Harris as Matt. I'm imagining we might get like a couple more pickup shots they had of him, but it's been confirmed this last episode, episode 6, was the last one Barney shot, and they did shoot this show in episode order, which makes sense with how different the sets have been every episode. So that's unfortunately it. I'm imagining we'll get some more pickup shots, and, you know, next time we'll see Matt, he will be somebody else. And the ways themselves, I'm a bit conflicted on. The visuals in concept, I think were really nice, but again, I'm seeing just visual goofiness here and there. With this, the benefit of it being streaming, if the show's successful enough, I feel like they could go back and improve the VFX after the season's been out, because, you know, studios are always like, you have to be released by this date, and VFX studios are like, we can't make things look perfect in that amount of time, and the studio goes, we don't care! And yeah, there was some wonky CG here, but again, I actually like the atmosphere. It did feel appropriate, properly like decayed, and then there's this oppressiveness of the darkness that's often described in the book, where it feels like shadows and torches don't go far enough, and this show did capture that while avoiding doing like Season 8 Game of Thrones Winter's Night vibes, where everything's just pitch black. And here the seeds for our biggest character conflict for the episode are planted, where some characters throughout the journey in the ways are backing the idea of we need to go get Matt. Matt's a good guy, like he's misunderstood, he's just dealing with a lot, and others are going, he left us! Basically, Egwene, and Rand's the one who's like, come on guys, he's Matt, he's a good dude, you don't know, he's a good man. And specifically, we get some more exposition from Loyal, and the building of character happening through just small moments of back and forth chemistry dialogue as they're making their way through the ways. And it's surprising how like the ways are creepy, yet when it's kind of like only torchlit and then you're secluded in this dark place, you can have a little tinge of romance. Lana 90s, little tinge of cuteness. We also get a couple of shots of Rand and Egwene snuggling up, Perrin looking at them like... Then we have confirmation to part of a fan theory I put forth in the spoiler section of the last episode, and that is there are Trollocs in the ways already, a concept that appears later in the books but is brought in earlier now. I'm objectively right, and you are wrong. And whilst this nappy time is occurring, the aforementioned Trolloc appears, and there is some channeling that shoots the Trolloc into the night, which is now going to draw Martin's in. They cannot take the ways all the way to their destination, and instead they must go to Faldara. Convenient, because this episode then unfurls there, and to be honest, they really needed to go there. And when Martin arrives, there's another story beat that I think actually it's the other way around from what I'm typically saying. I don't like the concept of having Moraine overwhelmed and Nynaeve lash out in a way she did similar to, I believe, episode 3, yes, or 4. They're blending. But she does, and provides a protective bubble that allows Moraine to recover enough to let them through. So while I don't like that idea, I think Moraine should be the one who's able to keep a level head and continue channeling. I guess you could justify it by saying, like, you know, Nynaeve lashes out. That's her thing now, and she's lashing out here. I don't know. I just don't like it necessarily.
Upon rewatching and editing, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh on this, because there's also her being driven by protecting everyone, and Martin Shin's accidentally playing into that drive of her by saying everyone's gonna die, so like, her biggest fear becomes the strength. I need to think on it more.
But it did actually look pretty good, despite the Black Wind not being how I personally envisioned it at all. And all these characters have like whispers going into their biggest fears that have appropriately been set up throughout this season. It's often kind of the one thing that's been set up for that character throughout this season, and that's actually going to get into my biggest complaint from a structure of time here for this whole season so far. Our Emond's Field 5 did not get enough time to develop for me, unfortunately. We had enough of Matt, we had enough of Moraine, and I'll even say Lan and Nynaeve, but in terms of Perrin, Egwene, and especially Rand, I just haven't had enough time to really connect with them because the show's been doing a lot of other stuff that now in hindsight feels like set up for later seasons. So I'm hopeful that setup will have great payoff, because I find it to be costing season 1 a little bit for me, especially for emotional investment towards Rand, to be fair, who has many more seasons to come to fruition. Notice everyone gets these nightmare whispers except for Loyal, and I would like to make up for that travesty of oversight. I would have loved to have heard Loyal's worst nightmares by doing my interpretation of what the Black Wind was whispering to him. Now, myself, lights please.
You'll never finish your book. It'll be panned by critics. You're not a good writer. You'll be forced to go home and live a life of just reading other people's adventures. You worthless Ogier. You're not hasty enough. Never, never, never. You're annoying them with your slowness. That hurt to say, Loyal, I love you, and none of it's true.
And I actually really like one character beat this did allow, where we saw Moraine's worst nightmare that the Black Wind is exploiting is that she will have to kill these children, which with a lot of her bravado has not necessarily been highlighted. She's actually explicitly stated, like, I'll do it, I'll kill a mother. But here it is shown, yes, this is like her worst case scenario. She is dreading the idea of having to do that. I like that. And once they're out, everyone looks pretty messed up, pretty not good, not wonderful outcome there.
You're not having a good time, are you?
Real quick though, before I stop talking about the ways, we also get Padanfane's whistling following them from behind, and that is scrumptious. We get our first look at Faldara though, which actually looks really awesome. In terms of whoever designed this city, I'd love to know what they pulled from, because it looks like something that's very real and realistic, and also fits within the purpose it is in this books and the world it is established in. And we also get Loyal pestering Land about information about him, setting up his most consistent character trait for later on in the series. Wonderful. The very character trait that inspired this tweet. Follow me, I'm hilarious. I'm an idiot, actually. But once Moraine is brought before the ruler here, tension is abound, as the ruler is very honorable towards Lan, but quite dismissive of Moraine because he thinks she's coming to try and input the tower's influence into his council. But once Moraine makes it clear that is not her intent, he lets his guard down. He's like, all right, thank you for the information you're bringing me of the fact that there are Trollocs in the ways. That's terrifying. And Moraine goes off to then talk to the ruler's sister and mentions the fact that she was not powerful enough to make it as Aes Sedai, but she was trained enough to make it to the Accepted. At least that's what I think having that ring without the color means. I mean, yeah, that's what it's meaning. I don't know why I'm acting like I'm not sure. I'm sure that's what that means. She's an Accepted. And many Accepted do get close to becoming Aes Sedai, but they cannot cut it. So world building being put in through character beats and also talking about her allegiances, so it felt kind of natural. Cool. And then we have the name drop of name drops. Min, M-I-N, not M-E-N for non-book readers. And apparently Moraine is going off to see a seer. This is a fairly different introduction of Min from the books, but it's one that makes a lot of sense with how they've restructured The Eye of the World, book 1, so I'm fine with it in general. And the actress who played Min, I actually really enjoyed her embodiment of someone who is quite tired of people's crap and has been working as a bartender a little too long to be anything but jaded. Yet there is deeper layers, because Min has the ability to see people's futures in vague, abstract images. And Moraine goes up to Min after bringing everyone... Wait! Before I get into that, as they're walking to the bar, Perrin notices Padanfane. He's here, whistling away. But in the bar, Moraine, as she goes to, like, pretend to get drinks, she's like, hey, my homie's over there. Any of them the Dragon Reborn? She doesn't ask that directly, but like, basically. And Min gives her some vague images she's seeing, but you get the feeling she's holding back, at least I did. And she also apparently has some visions about Moraine and tells her that the Amerlin seat will be her downfall. And this pretty much confirms a theory I'm going to talk about in depth in spoiler talk. While Moraine is getting these visions, though, we're getting a bit of banter between our two Rivers folk, and these are my favorite moments because I feel starved from them. There's so many great scenes in Eye of the World where the characters are just bonding, and I'm just not getting enough of that in this show so far, so I'm like dehydrated when I finally get it. I'm like, yes, bonding, friendship, yay! Though there have been some small friend moments, especially between Rand and Mat and Egwene and Perrin, that have really brought that connection to life for me. It just hasn't quite been consistent enough. And then my least favorite scene of the episode that is performed fine, but it's actually, again, that inverse of what my usual criticism of the show is, where I think it's a good execution of a concept that should not have been there, and that is the hinted at in the first episode love triangle between Perrin, Rand, and Egwene is now put a spotlight on it by Nynaeve. Before that, though, there is Moraine kind of unveiling to all the party what us, the audience members, have known, which is, hey, one of you's the dragon, the rest of you are not, and the people who are not are gonna die. Got it? Bye. And then we have everyone trying to decide if they're actually go or not. But then we have Rand being rude towards Egwene, which makes Perrin stand up for Egwene, and Nynaeve point out, like, hey, stop fighting over her like she's something to be owned. And then there's that so tense moment of Perrin being like, I've only ever loved my wife. And we're like, then why did the Black Winds know that saying maybe you were trying to get rid of her was the most painful thing? It's because you clearly have feelings for Egwene. And despite a lot of people who told me, like, politely, oh, I don't think they're trying to set that up in the first episode, and then the few people who were telling me quite rudely that I was dumb for saying they were setting that up, here's the setup I was totally right about. I'm objectively right, and you are wrong. And to the people who were respectful and just disagreed, hey, I get it, it wasn't super heavy-handed, so you could kind of wipe that away. And to the people who were rude about it, suck my butt! But I stand by what I said. Despite a lot of book fans actually kind of shipping Perrin and Egwene, I don't like this for the show, and I wish we could have gotten drama here of some other variety. I think Nynaeve actually had quite a few earned issues that could have resulted in her storming off in the way she did and going off to meet Lan. But alright, let's move on from here and I'll get into heavier criticisms reviews at the end. We have a scene with Lan and Moraine where it's clear Moraine is ready to kind of end things. She's just kind of putting all the emotional cards on the table and she encourages Lan to go off and say his goodbyes. And then we have maybe actually my favorite sequence of this episode, because I've liked that they've gotten rid of some of the old school fantasy frowning towards sexuality and just embraced the more modern, trend towards, people bone. And we have Nynaeve going and following Lan to his family, and we see her get to meet everyone. She gets a hint that he's actually a prince, and then she follows him back home, or not follows him, goes with him. Whatever. And they have sexy time. And I'll actually admit, I just told a bunch of people to suck my butt, so I also need to admit when I'm wrong. Earlier in the second or third episode, and I was like, how did Nynaeve manage to track Lan? That's actually something that's straight out of the book, and I just forgot it. So I suck butt there. I will suck the butt there. But not only did I really enjoy the chemistry between Zoe Robbins and Daniel Henney, not only did I like seeing Lan's whole family and the hinting of what his past was, not only did I like the having him state, the reason I bonded Moraine was I didn't have a purpose, which is largely his character arc in New Spring, and is quite nicely setting up quite a few things for him as a character. But this is the resolution to probably the best built relationship of any kind for this series so far. So me as a fan was just kind of gushing over it. But this is the episode that should have been titled Everybody because then we flash over to Rand and Egwene, and here we have really actually probably the best chemistry these two have shown in terms of performance, and despite it being a little too emotional for me, I enjoyed the dialogue, and especially having Rand say to Egwene, I'm not gonna let anyone else be your warder, for at this point in their relationship just made me go oh, that's so cute. And I also really like the detail that we see Rand missing. He is so distraught internally, and we're about to see why. Rand is unable to sleep, and we get a flashback from a scene in the books that happens very early on. I get why they changed it to here though, because it would give away the hand of who is the dragon way too soon, which from a script writing perspective is pretty obvious why you'd shift this around and make it less obvious Rand's the dragon. I didn't think it would be as effective as it was, but as someone who is a book reader who's been watching a lot of non-book readers get into the show, basically no one knew who the dragon was, and there was a lot of free marketing that happened from having people go, it could be that, it could be this, it could be that. So that's actually really effective, and I give the writers more credit than I originally did. This mystery was well executed enough that it had people who had not read the books talking a lot. I'm just curious what the reaction will be now that it's been shown to be Rand. That scene that's in the books much earlier that's shown here is Tam, wounded, full of fever, essentially telling Rand, you're adopted, and I found you on Dragonmount, which then justifies why Rand recognized Dragonmount, I guess. He knew from when he was a baby. Not actually. There's actually a very justified reason in the books we'll get into many seasons down the road. And we see actually the channeling that happened in the Ways was Rand protecting Egwene, which makes a lot of sense. We see, I think I saw this visual right, his weaves overtake hers and push the Trolloc because he's freaking out. Keep it cool, Rand. Come on, you brought in Martin Shin. Lan could have had that. Come on, get it together, Rand! But as Rand is finally coming to terms with this, he picks back up the bow and is just methodically hitting the bullseye. Hey, nice visual imagery. It's a metaphor for what's happening in here for him. And then we have, not from a show perspective, but as a book reader, my favorite scene in maybe this whole episode, and let me explain exactly why. Because Moraine let spill that Min is a seer, and so Rand wants to confirm all these suspicions he has, which on surface value you're like, come on man, just accept it. But deep down, if you were in the same position, you would really want to know the answers to for sure before you march off into your death, most likely. The portrayal of men is very accurate to the books. I'll just repeat that again. And there's also a couple slip-ins of her seeing things that are major spoilers down the road for later in the books, but are certainly vague enough for people who haven't read them to be like, ah! What you mean about that over there? I've been doing a Wisconsin accent to make fun of my girlfriend a lot, so I'm gonna start slipping that in the videos. Here, let me do that again. Ooh, what you doing over there? That's me doing Wisconsin. It's not accurate, but it's enough to piss Kayla off. And there's a change that as a book fan, I love, because it fits into the whole idea of the Wheel of Time, the pattern, and everything being connected. And Min actually talks about the fact that the first vision she had was seeing Tam in the city of Tarvalin carrying Rand, and that like triggered her because Rand is so powerful in the pattern for this ability to come into the light, which absolutely makes sense with him being Tal'Virin. And now it's coming full circle for her for coming into him once again and being the one who's like, yes, you're the dragon. That actually fits into the mythology of the Wheel of Time really, really, really well. But then we have Egwene post-coitus with Rand going to check on Nynaeve, and she goes into the bedroom and sees that the bed is not slept in. Nynaeve walks in and Egwene gets to go, I bet you were did you it seems like you And then Perrin awkwardly walks in after last night having his like kinda hidden crush on Egwene. And I think it is just like a crush. People have crushes even when they're married. Unveiled, so there's like a little bit of tension, but it's not that big a deal because we're all moving past that. We're all grown adults and we're going to the eye, except we're not. Because Lan walks in and he goes, hey, my bond has been masked by Moiraine. And that's not good. She's gone by herself. And that's when they put together, oh, Rand's not. Oh, no. And then Nynaeve realized, wait, the bond was just masked? So Moiraine felt like... I'll let you discuss. That's the question of the day. Back to the drama. And we get a final shot of Moiraine and Rand walking into the Blight. And I will say my final real big compliment for the show up to this point is I really enjoy the visualization of the Blight, seeing it like curling in on itself. It looks like a bunch of gnarled knuckles and we see like trees with skulls grown into them. It just looks as dangerous and upsetting as the book writes it to be. So kudos again on the set design. I've really enjoyed set design from beginning to end of this show, so except for some stuff in the White Tower, but yeah, kudos overall. And by God, am I happy I figured out to watch this show in filmmaker mode. It just helps a ton, and if you're going to watch this show, do that, because every other picture mode on my TV looked really bad. Alright, but before we get into the rating and the review, a quick word from today's sponsor. Do you suffer from hairy nipples and back pain like me? Well, don't worry, today I have the solution for you. Map Me. Lord of Maps is here to bring you high-quality, detailed maps of the world in a fantastical style. Map Me! We will get one of these. Locations across the globe, brought to life in an imaginative, creative way by these dorks right here. Are you a dork? You're watching me, so you are. So this holiday, if you would like to map me... Oh, get a beautiful fantasy map for your loved one this holiday season and support an up-and-coming fantasy business. Check the description down below for today's coupon code currently visible on my crotch to go ahead and get a discount for your fantastical maps today. Map Me. That one wasn't close enough to grab. Go get a map, it's right down there. Boop. Alright, so the rating before I get into the nuance for me is a very solid 8.5 for this episode. I had my criticism, but a lot of them came from just being a book fan and being resentful of changes, and I know logically most of them are justified, so I'm kind of just sitting here like, yeah, I get it. Especially knowing the show lost Barney in the last episode unexpectedly, like that's been confirmed, and they had to do a lot of last-second shuffling around. I can't imagine how difficult that is from a writing perspective. Thane is here, and who he's set up to be a foil against is Matt. He's the only one of the party he's really had any interaction with, so I'm curious to see what Fane's presence in Fal Dara is going to mean, because in the book, there's a whole different approach to Fane to what's happening here, and I just don't know what direction it's going to be taken in. I would bet money in the original version of this season's script, the big showdown in Fal Dara was gonna be between Fane and Matt, and we can't get that because it's confirmed in this episode that Matt is back in Tarvalin and Moraine's actually trying to sick the Red Aja on him, which... No, I get there's going to be pushback on this, I get there's going to be people who disagree with me, but for me, this is absolutely something Moiraine, book or in show, would not be shown to do. Kill him herself, yes. Sick the Red Aja?
No, not in my opinion.
Now, when I say this, I get people who are saying, like, no, it's justified, Matt went off. Yes, because after Barney left, they have editing and reshoots to try and shift. I'm not saying they didn't originally have a plan for Barney. In fact, I'm saying the opposite. There are things that are justifying a lot of his movements that, to me, feel kind of stiltily shifted to go in another direction that's as justified as what they could do with what they already had set up. I'm not saying they had no plan for Matt. That's weird, and I've seen a lot of people claim that's what I'm saying. No. But aside from some drama that felt really unearned and inserted, with specifically the parent situation, and some acting that didn't always flow with me perfectly, I thought this was as good an episode 7 as we could get, with all the complaints I've had with the season up until this point. And instead, we're seeing this version of the Wheel of Time really find its footing for its final plunge in the last episode. Unfortunately for the show, this last episode is going to be the most difficult thing to do, in my humble opinion, because even among book fans, the Eye of the World's ending is heavily criticized. And so the show actually has, for the first time, I think, or I would at least assume, near universal permission from book fans to do some substantial rewrites. And it's going to be interesting to see what exactly they're going to do here and how their changes from the book up until this point are going to be utilized to justify it. I've never been this close to a show in terms of knowing the source material and rewatching many times over everything they've done, and I'm just left so curious on what's gonna come. All right, let's go ahead and transition into spoilers / theorizing episode moments. Get out! Move! So I have one thing from the last episode that's near confirmed for me. I put forth that Leandrin was the one who was letting Trollocs out of the ways, and that's why she was out and about in the area where the Trolloc attack then occurred. And this episode heavily hints that that might actually be the case, because we see there are Trollocs in the ways already, and Land even says that's how they got there. I'm assuming in season 2, Leandrin's going to take on a much bigger antagonist role directly, and we're going to have the discovery of her being Black Aja at a focus point for it. And the man she's meeting in Clitoris Harbor is going to be one of the Forsaken. Calling it. And we also have this moment where, yes, spoilers up until middle of the series here, it's said that the Amerlin seat will be Moiraine's downfall. And that, to me, confirms what a lot of book fans have already been putting forth, and I'm honestly embarrassed I didn't catch myself. This being drawn to the Eye of the World is a trap. It is a trap by one of the Forsaken, and the Dark One is not involved at all, aside from just the Forsaken doing this. And we are seeing the dragon being brought to, presumably, a Shamael, someone who's been in the dreams. He was implanting these dreams and these ideas in Swan Sanche's head, and that's how we're getting here. It's still kind of flimsy for me, because I feel like even with those visions, the optimal strategy wouldn't be to yeet the dragon at the Dark One, which this still feels like. But if this turns out to be true in the final episode, I will actually be bumping up, I think, these last couple episodes a little bit, maybe like half a point wise in my mind, because this would make a lot more sense. And mad props to the fans who came up with this theory, because this episode seemed to pretty directly confirm it for me, with the idea that the Amerlin will be her downfall through these visions that are implanted in her head. But does that mean Moiraine dies at the end of this season? We don't know, and it's going to be a huge change from the books if she dies this early. Yes, I said middle of the series spoilers. She does eventually die. I warned you. Don't yell at me. I put the spoiler warning. But anyway, everyone, let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments down below. This may be my favorite episode yet, and I am quite excited to see how the series is going to wrap on up with its season finale. Put your own personal ratings, of course, and as always, thank you, Lord of Maps, for sponsoring this video. Have a good one, y'all. Peace!